Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Campolo, and we're going to be starting off with just you and me while Travis finishes up his last meeting. Today, we're going to be talking about Bedrock Layout. Very excited about it. It's a project that I've been following from the sidelines and interviewed Travis about it for a podcast once. What's up, Ben? And he's been on a lot of other good streams as well, such as Semantics. So I'll start dropping links and stuff probably once Travis is actually here and we're talking about it. But since we got some time to kill, I was wondering if anyone was going to notice and notice right away. I have some new glasses. I got 2 new glasses that I'm very excited about. These are transitionals also. So these are kind of like my outdoor glasses and thank you, and will be kind of stuff I can like wear out on the town and things like that. And then I also got like some work glasses that look fairly similar to my older ones with like the kind of thicker rimmed glasses, and those have some sort of blue UV light protection, so it's like when you are looking at the screen for many hours a day, such as I do, for both work and fun, I tend to stare at screens. So it gives a good way of filtering out stuff like that, I believe. That is a dolphin with sunglasses on, I believe. What is up, Brent? So here we got a link right now for the Bedrock Layout Semantics episode. By the way, Ben, I just realized you had mentioned it and I hadn't really thought about it, but Semantics is on hiatus for a little bit, it sounds like. Hope you're getting some good rest, and hopefully I could help fill the semantic shaped hole in people's hearts while you're away. Thank you. Yeah, I can imagine that that's a big commitment to do a stream, not only weekly but sometimes twice a week. I know you're putting out quite a lot of content. Yeah, so another announcement that I can make is that I am starting a new role soon at Edgio. Hoping to be back early next year with a bit of a different approach. Cool. Well, I am looking forward to that. I'm going to share my screen for a little bit and talk a bit about Edgio, because this is something very exciting. It is a big shift for me. I should also get up Twitch chat over here. I did that backwards. Web dev. There we go. So I have officially moved on from QuickNode. I have a lot of thoughts and things written in different pockets of the internet kind of about it and about why, but I think the main thing for me is that I was feeling a constant pull and FOMO around basically the stuff, everything else I was doing that was not Web3, which is not to say I didn't enjoy Web3 or find it very interesting and educational and something that, despite the problems inherent to it, I still believe in. And that's something that I may talk at length about at a later time. But right now, I'm just want to focus on the just how cool it is to be involved in like the development of modern and future web frameworks. And just like, obviously I'm someone who's been involved, Sabin, in frameworks for longer than I've had a technical legit job. I was on the Redwood team back in December 2020 and have been ever since. And that's something that has kind of remained consistent as I jumped from, you know, doing like podcast, FS Jam, is that being the only thing I was doing, to then having a job and splitting my time between GraphQL and FS Jam, and then switching to QuickNode, and then splitting my time between Redwood, FS Jam, and QuickNode. And so I see Edgio in a lot of ways as kind of consolidating my life back together into some sort of coherency, where the things I can work on, the things that I do for fun, can be a bit more aligned. And I think that's just going to make me feel better overall about how I spend my time and the things I choose to do with my time, and not feeling like that I'm kind of trying to live in like 2 separate worlds with 2 separate tools and 2 separate leaders and competitors. And just like, it's a lot to keep into in your head, even for me, someone who enjoys all this stuff so much. So that's kind of where I'm at with Edgio. Edgio, the way I have been describing it, is it's like if what was it? If you had Netlify or Vercel, but it was like SSR first instead of static first, because they're more based around like giving you an easy kind of deployment solution, but doing it in a way where you're not just building static assets, you actually have like a server as well. So that's something that I found very interesting. And they are an amalgamation of 3 different companies: Edgecast, Limelight, and Layer Zero, that all kind of combined and have formed this thing now known as Edgio. And for people who do know me, may have heard me speak on JavaScript Jam, which is a weekly Twitter space, used to be a clubhouse. And then they have somewhat of a legit podcast recording as well, where they just like bring on people and they like show off tools and stuff. But I've been going to these now for over a year now, and I very much enjoy the vibe. And people like Ishan and Scott are just 2 people that I have a lot of respect for, and am looking forward to getting to work with. So this is Ishan, and then we got Scott Steinlage. Good old Scott. So those will be 2 guys I'll be working with a lot, and we'll be getting to, integrate different frameworks into tools like Edgio, and then work more with framework authors themselves, and then also just learn more about like the CDN business and like what does it mean to work on a very legit large scale CDN. So it's going to be really interesting. Very much looking forward to it. All right, so we got Travis here, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up.
I made it.
Hello. What's up, man? How you doing?
Doing well. I am so sorry. Like, this life, like, no matter how much I try, like, I gotta go. I really gotta go. I gotta go.
No, it's all good. I got a little bit of time to give my whole spiel about Edgio, which was actually nice. I was not planning on necessarily doing that, but that worked out well. So yeah, dude, how you been? Tell me about how your last month or 2 has been. What your life is like. You haven't been laid off anywhere yet, right? You still
No,
got a job?
I'm still working.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in a hiring freeze, so I think most places are. But, yeah. But no. Things are going well. Plex is in case you didn't know, this is where I work now. Plex.
Yeah, well, why don't you introduce yourself? I think most people in the chat probably already know you, but for posterity's sake and the future people watch this video who have never heard of you before, what's the deal with Travis Waith-Mair?
Travis Waith-Mair, the infamous Travis Waith-Mair. I'm I currently work at Plex. I've worked at a couple different places, but I think I'm probably most known for is actually my layout library, Bedrock Layout. And I also Twitch stream, which I haven't done the last few weeks because I've just been like swamped at work. But anyway, where I like do maintenance on it, do like doc updates, things like that. And yeah, and you can check that out at bedrock-layout.dev. I've also done conference talks around the web, just 4 or 5, but actually probably like 4 conference talks. But anyway,
what are some of which one was your favorite out of the concerts, the conferences you spoke at?
Actually the most recent one, just because of the subject, it was at Conf 42, and I gave an intro to Solid.js for React developers or anyone else, but really it's for React developers. And that just because I'm super bullish on React, on Solid. I mean, Solid is, and I know you are too. You like Ryan Carniato.
Yeah, I mean, episode 2 of this stream was Ryan Carniato was talking about Solid. So that's I'm putting a big planting a flag in that framework as well right now. I feel it's in a point right now where, especially with like the meta framework, Solid Start being where it's at, it's like a lot of people are going to start using it. I think you probably never used it before. And like, there's gonna be a lot of people coming into the community, and it's gonna be like a fun time for the framework itself, but also like a crucial time to make sure like the right foundations are set and the right expectations are set and things like that.
Yeah, and the community around Solid is super helpful. Like, there's so many times where I'm like making like such newbie mistakes, and I'm like, hey, why isn't this working? They're like, you're breaking reactivity. It's like, oh yeah. But like nobody's like dissing it. Like they're just totally like, oh yeah, this is a learning curve. You're breaking reactivity. Here you go. Now it works, right? And I'm like, yeah. Anyway,
I'm grabbing some just links for the chat, and it's Bedrock Layout, not Bedrock Layouts. This is something I always forget.
Yeah.
So when looking it up,
it's even I will say Bedrock Layouts sometimes because I want to, but like
But it's not
Bedrock
layouts because
Layout.
it's layout primitives. So, and this
Exactly.
is because it's like a composable idea, right?
Exactly. That's the originally the term is like. In fact, that's still technically termed Bedrock Layout primitives, because yeah, it's I call it the low dash web layouts. It's the idea is like these things aren't supposed to like probably build individually, but like once you compose them together, they're going to help you build lots of different things.
Well, this is me showing my relative newness as a developer. I know what Lodash is. I've never used Lodash. For people who haven't used Lodash, what is Lodash?
Ironically, I've never directly used Lodash either in a project. I've never npm installed Lodash personally either, but and I apologize if you hear some barking in the background. I have
Oh,
a
good.
new puppy that we just bought this weekend, and we're crate
Oh, that's
training
fun. What's their name?
him. Barkley.
Barkley. All right,
Barkley.
Charles Barkley.
Yeah. Well, this is my son who actually came up with the name. He was just like,
Okay.
if we ever get a son, like a boy dog, we're gonna name him Barkley.
And what's the breed?
Oh, he's a King Charles Cavalier Spaniel. Yeah, he's a beautiful dog. 15 weeks, and he's sometimes likes to remind us that he's still in his crate. So if you hear
In
that,
case you're
every so
wondering,
often,
I'm still a dog. I'm over here. I'm a dog. Yeah, I have a cat. So the cat is fairly quiet. She'll make like very low purring sounds every now and then, but that's pretty much it.
cats are pretty independent, so like they don't need like, they get the social gratification on their time, not not when you want it. But
So what I want to talk about with Bedrock
oh,
Layout
but
is
you asked
the
the question, what's Lodash? Yeah. We forgot
right
about that.
Lodash.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's hit that
So
first.
yeah,
Yeah.
Lodash is exactly that. It's like this. It's a utility library that allows you to like. Well, in fact, a lot of things that are in like JavaScript proper, like were part of underscore, which eventually became part of Lodash. But the whole thing is like allows you to do composable things where like yeah, individually these utilities don't do a lot, but when you compose them together, they can do some really powerful things, and you can write apps around them. Yeah. There was a whole Lodash versus underscore debate in Lodash one. Exactly. Yeah. Like it was originally underscore. In fact, I don't have the book right here, but like one of my favorite books is called Functional JavaScript, and it's all written with underscore. And I don't think many people use underscore anymore, but it's still a really good book. But that's what this idea of the layout library is built on. The same idea is like, yeah, a lot of the web layout patterns we use are really just can be broken down to like just a handful of like other patterns that we can just compose up and build out your complicated layout patterns. And obviously, it's never going to do everything, but like it can get you like 80% of the way, and like the 20% is probably going to be custom stuff that you were going to do anyway. So.
Yeah, I think that all makes a lot of sense. People, even if they haven't used Lodash, just this idea of like, common tools or just hunks of code or things you're going to pass around to like do things that you do a lot in a project makes a lot of sense. But what I find interesting is that it seems like this idea sometimes appears and reappears and then kind of disappears from like styling, because styling can be something that you want to be like really like handcrafted, like artisanal almost. So there's less of this idea of like, well, we want everything to look the same, so we want to avoid kind of doing that. But at the same time, there are like very common things we do on the web in styles, and so it actually makes sense to do for that. And so this is what I found very interesting with your project, is that this idea of composable styles I hadn't really heard much of before I started hearing you talking about it. And now I've kind of gone back and I found other examples of it. But I would love to hear about like what inspired this, like beyond like things like Lodash, and like how does this relate to things like the Avo method, and like what's kind of the history there? Because I find this to be very interesting, so I didn't really know about until I kept hearing people like you and Chan talk about it.
Well, I mean, like if you want to go to the history of Bedrock, like I call it my RDD, my revenge-driven development, and you know this story a little bit. But for the viewers you don't know, like I was basically working on a design system for a company. This was like 2-3 companies ago, and it was all internal, which is pretty typical. But like it was getting to the point where I'm like, this would be really helpful if we could have some open source. If we could open source this and use just like public npm, things like that, and just have that available open source. Not that we even really thought that it was going to be like picked up, just even partly as like a check, like, hey, let's go put this out there and see if we can get a community built around it. And I knew that was a uphill battle to climb. I knew that it was probably going to say no. But like the moment, like when I we had the meeting and I didn't even get like a couple minutes in, had all this like presentation of what the benefits are and all that. And they're like, no, we're not. Like, I basically said, hey, we want to open source this, right? Yeah, you're not going to. Like in the first 3 minutes, like shut me down before I could even like say the benefits. And so I was just like, it was like I had a Christmas break, like kind of shortly after. So I started the original foundation, started planning that. And I think it was later the next year that I officially got it like out on a GitHub and got it going. But basically, I just took the things that were in our design system that I really loved and I was building out, that I kind of like felt was like my own baby, the thing that wasn't really part of like the design system proper, but more of like these utilities to help create consistent spacing. Because that was the biggest deal for a designer, was like he just wanted the spacing to be consistent all the time. So if people weren't putting in like hacky one rem margins everywhere or whatever just to get things to look almost right, he wanted the precise things, and he wanted an easy way for people to do it the right way. And so that's what I started building on. I started using things I had been learned from like Hayden Pickering at everylayout.com, I think, as well as just other patterns that I've gotten used to. And I was really proud of that. And so I'm like, I'm just going to take that part out. That part isn't really design system specific. There's just utilities. We could put any spacing scheme in there and it doesn't matter. It's not related specifically to our design system. So I pulled just that part out. And that's where Bedrock kind of evolved from.
I'm gonna start sharing my screen a bit so that we can show some of the things we're talking about here. So this is every layout div, and so we look at some of the things here, and we'll see a lot of this with Bedrock Layout. We have things like the stack, which is like you want to stack stuff on top of each other, and like
exactly.
This is one of the examples I know you always give. It's really basic and kind of easy to think about. Then you have like the box. Ooh, I need to pay for the box. The box must be important. What do you think the box is?
This every layout you have to like. He has a book in there, and the website actually is behind a paywall, and that's cool. He's done a lot of work. That's fine, and I think it's worth the money for anyone to go out there to check it out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm never gonna tell anyone they're not allowed to charge for their services. So.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So this is the Avo method. So what is this?
So originally the Bedrock was, like I said, because it was ported, our design system was built on style components. So that became part of the original part of Bedrock. But as I was going through, that meant everybody who wanted to use Bedrock had to both want to use React and want to use style components. And that's fine. Style, like CSS and JS, kind of gets a bad rap. It's not as bad, in my opinion, as some of the people kind of make it out to be, but it does have a runtime concern. And if that's something you need to, that it actually starts becoming a problem, you can't take style components into your library.
Well, I think the things that people wanted from, I think, CSS and JS, we've now figured out a lot of different ways to accomplish it, I think, which is the idea of
exactly.
You just want to be able to not have a whole CSS style sheet. That's a separate file where you write 10,000 lines of these CSS. You want to just have components or pages or whatever, and then your CSS is kind of just coupled to that component or that page, and then also usually lives in the same file and lets you work on them kind of in tandem with each other, and then scopes it. And it's like that's what we want. Like how we achieve that doesn't really particularly matter that much. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, and there was, when it really took off, things like CSS custom properties really weren't like standard across all the browsers. Now that's like just everybody's doing it. Like And a lot of the things that you couldn't get easily in just plain CSS, like style components and CSS and JS, bridge that gap. There's some things you still can't get, things like type safety, things like that. Which, yeah, I know there's some other libraries that still address that, things like vanilla extract, things like that. So you can still go down that route and get some TypeScript and things like that integration into your things.
Yeah, I think what Ben is saying here is really true, is that a lot of this comes down to things that are always being kind of built into the browser and built into things like CSS, and we're getting closer and closer to not needing all as many weird hacky custom JavaScript kind of solutions to do lots of different things, this being one of them.
The thing that this developer experience I still get with CSS and JS that you can't imitate in any other way is that I can have my CSS, well, anyway, in React, I should clarify, is that the CSS can live in the same file as your component. And that makes it really easy. So you're not flipping back between files and and adjusting that kind of stuff. I really like that experience. But when we get to a point where we're trading off like user experience for developer experience, it's probably not worth it anymore.
Because there's a way you can do that but baking it into like the build step. So it's like you end up with something optimized, and that isn't going to include a bunch of like client side JavaScript, but that still lets you do a bunch of stuff in JavaScript.
Exactly. And so we're also maturing to a point in technology where it's really easy to bring in styles and style sheets from other things. Like the other thing that like style components and CS and JS gave you is like you didn't need a build step to make it work. It just because it was all runtime. You didn't have to worry about making all that work before it got built. You just had to, when it got deployed, it just worked. But like honestly, people aren't setting up their own build steps anymore. They're probably using Next or Remix or whatever, or Red.
Yeah, if you have a meta framework that sets it up for you, then that's really nice, because then you can kind of get still the DX and not have to worry so much about fiddling with build tools. But that's because there's a team of people who have a framework that figured that out for you. Going back to my whole thing, that's one of the main values you get from framework. So let's dig into this. So
yeah, that was a long way to get to. Like I wanted to build a CSS framework around Bedrock, and so it took a while. Like I had found some different things, and then I watched Michael Chantastic on the web, and he's got a whole YouTube video, and I initially used it to find a solution for something actually when it was still under style components, using these data selectors. But it was seeing that these data selectors really have a lot of value and really give this really cool component like atmosphere, and we'll go into details of why. Like
this is where like a lot of my ignorance of CSS comes through, because I had never used this, or really even would say I like knew much about it before I heard about this. And so like an attribute, so just define like what is an attribute selector exactly? Is this like
anything that's on an HTML tag, any of those things like href, src, whatever those attributes are, those are an attribute that you can select for in your CSS. So you can look for all your A tags with an href, which all of them should. But like that's just a very simple example. If you want to do or like you want to look for
a moderator, I forgot I did that. I was like, do I have any mods? Of course. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, and we're seeing right here, like these are some example. Like if we want to find any of the anchor tags with a title element, we can select for that, and we can color it purple here in this example. Or we can also select on what the value is given to those attributes. So not just do they exist, but what is their value? So we can check, depending on the wildcard selector, we can check for exact value. So attribute equals certain value, it'll look for that exact value.
Yeah, and what does this one do? The little squiggly,
the tilde or whatever. That one does. I don't know what the actual word is, but it's going to look for strings. Like it will delimit the strings space separated, kind of like how you would do class names, And if one of those delimited strings matches the value, then it will select.
Okay, gotcha.
So
also, hello, Fuzzy Bear.
exactly.
We're talking Bedrock layouts here and data selectors. And I was asking about that one because I'm actually seeing that here in Chan's examples specifically.
So yeah, if we look here in Chan's
you
example,
create an attribute selector and then you have a value. And so how does the
so in this case it says mention, but if he had some other strings like mention space, Bob space, your uncle, whatever, even though there's that string says mention space, Bob space, your uncle, it's going to still select because the word mention is in there. Now, if you did mention Bob, your uncle, all as one word, it wouldn't match. Or if you had that whole string in there and you didn't do that little tilde, it wouldn't match because it's looking without that little tilde, it's going to look for the whole string is going to match that word mentioned. But as long as you have that tilde, it's going to say, do I find the string mention in there? And I think it's important to understand, just because there's that specificity rules, that data selectors are at the same specificity level as class names. So if you still want to select by ID or whatever, IDs will win.
All right, we got some comments here in the chat. Ben is saying, tilde says, is this a word in this list? Asterisk says, is this a substring in the whole list? And then Fuzzy's saying, I'll say this, using attributes in your document query selector is pretty slow compared to IDS and CSS selectors.
Yeah, so if you're in JavaScript doing document.query selector, it is slower than the original get element by ID or get element by class name. But I mean, we're not really going into JavaScript at this point. This is like the CSS, so it's more optimized around that.
Interesting. But, yeah, if Fuzzy can drop a link on that if he's got any. Cool. So is this how Bedrock Layout is set up, or was this something that influenced Bedrock Layout?
This influenced Bedrock because I wanted to build Bedrock with just CSS and prove that it could work without any JavaScript, without style components, and without React. And so, but I still wanted that developer experience where you're passing in props, where you're like, you can pass in different things and it will just work. You don't have to like try to do anything. And so if we go into Bedrock Layout and we can go look at the CSS, and this better work. So down on the left, these are all the React components, but if you scroll down on the left, down to a good one is split to show an example of this.
This one?
Yes. Wow. I need to fix something because the white has disappeared.
Interesting. Also, I've got a bunch of different browsers, so sometimes other ones will work better than others. My whole deal's all messed up. Okay.
Interesting. I'll have to go back and fix this because that's not very legible. That's
funny.
That sucks. But anyway, so this is weird.
But the content in the back though is that's correct in terms of like what it's showing in terms of how the sizes relate to each other and whatnot.
On your screen, if you could hit like D, just the letter D.
Hold on.
On your keyboard, I mean, sorry.
D. What does that do?
It should open up the docs. Yeah, and is that not loading? The docs are not loading properly here. I mean,
where is this hosted on?
This is hosted on Netlify.
Mm-hmm. Might be
having
connection issues of some sorts. Do you want to share your screen if it's working on yours?
It is not working on mine. This is
all right. Well, that answers that mystery.
Let's see your docs.
Nikki T, hello.
Well,
yeah, I don't think this is.
I'm going to put a GitHub issue. Anyway, so maybe this is not you're not going to be able to see what's going on. Okay, so we actually, if we go back.
Go back to.
If we go back to split, we might have to look at. And if you go up into this is an annoying hack, but back in the path, you'll see docs.
Back
change that to story right there.
like that.
And so we'll go back to seeing the examples there.
Mm-hmm.
And then right click on just one of these examples and we'll get the divs under the hood here.
Okay. This one right here, right?
This is all Storybook stuff. I use Storybook as well because I get the visual regression testing through Chromatic, and then I also don't have to rewrite my docs multiple times, the same examples. Oh no, maybe if you click on your div selector thing, part of the tool, and then actually click. Divs. I know. Okay. Well, it's also in an iframe.
Right. There it is. There's the iframe.
Okay. Okay, there we go. Into the iframe. One more in the body. Into the root.
There we go.
Okay. So in this example.
Okay.
This is just showing the getter. This wasn't going to show you the example I wanted. But okay, let's just mess with this. So right now, where it says data bedrock split true, just change that word true to
false.
To fraction, the word fraction.
Like that.
And then colon.
Oh. And then colon or colon.
And then fraction colon 1/4. So 1/4.
1/4. Like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then when you change that, you should see. It's hard to see.
Let me try and make this a little bit. Do this.
Yeah. So the idea is like you can provide the string that says fraction 1/4, and it will automatically know to split it 1/4 in the first value and put the remaining amount in the second item in the list.
There we go.
We're on the gutter example, so that's why. But
it was a colon. That's right.
Oh my gosh! I should double check the whole website, make sure it was working great before all this.
That's all good. So what I wanted to do actually originally was just like spin up a React project and just like do that anyway. So
we could do that.
Yeah.
But this is where I was going with is now once I got this working and I got this like attribute selector working with CSS, it didn't make sense for me to continue to maintain a style component version and then the CSS library. So recently Bedrock Layout had a breaking change, and now everything uses the CSS framework under the hood, and it does all this attribute selecting and all that stuff under the hood, and you just pass in props. So,
okay, I'm not sure if I can get the getting started thing to load. Maybe does this still need to be story, or should I change
no, the docs.
Yeah, you need to figure out your docs, bruh.
It was working. I updated some like stuff last night.
Do you have like an old like preview linker or something that we could just use?
Could. What? I almost wonder if like Netlif maybe it probably needs to be redeployed or something. Like clear the cache.
Right. Yeah. When in doubt, clear the cache. Yeah, this is also why I would recommend just having some sort of like quick getting started instructions in your README also of your GitHub.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Like this might be a bit of a fragile docs.
Well, it wasn't. But no, that's valid.
There is until it is, That's why you gotta be decentralized, brah. Decentralize your life.
Just make my life easier. Let me see. Sorry.
I'm gonna just stop screen sharing for a second. Also, if people notice now, I have my stream background that we got from Ben's first stream in the background, so you got a little bit less of a just forever black infinite background. Although I do like this guy a bit more. Hey. What is up with everyone out there in the world? How's your Monday going? What do you got coming up this week? Someone tell me how you're feeling. I am going to be off for the next month, which is pretty sweet. So I have lots of time for podcast editing and making of the streams. So hopefully going to do this every Monday. If I get really bored, I might even throw in some extra ones every now and then, just like kind of solo work. And yeah, for people who aren't following me all over the place, I should probably share my solid start tutorial that I recently wrote. Let's see
That's
if
good.
I can.
By the way, I'm going to pull this up locally because I know it was working locally on my computer. We can just go through it on my computer locally, and I'll figure out why the dock side isn't working after.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to switch to you in a quick second. Let me first do this. So we got Saban said, working on a series on testing and Prisma. That's really great. I have not ever had to personally test Prisma stuff. Let's see, any fun plans made? Make sure to have some fun. Oh, I have all the fun. I have nothing but fun. Astro. And here is my blog post for anyone who wants to check it out on my Astro site. Cool. Okay. Are you able to share your screen, Travis?
I should be able to. Let's share screen. Okay.
Okay. And then
Let me close
cool.
work stuff. So this is what it's supposed to look like.
Right, yeah. And I've seen it before, so.
Yeah. So if we want, there's a... Yes. Here is what I was trying to show you.
Do you bump up your font quite a bit?
Oh, yeah.
And for now, you can probably just block off your code editor also.
Yeah. If I make the whole screen here.
Yeah, and then do it like 3 or 4 more times up the font. One more.
Is that better? One more? There we go.
All right, yeah.
So
okay, so what's going on here?
Okay, so this is what I was going to show you, and that you can see, like, yeah, here's the getters, and then yeah, here's a way to do all the fractions. You would just say fraction 1/4, 1/3, 1/2, for example, and so on.
And so the fraction stuff with the fraction colon, then actually giving the fraction. So that is Bedrock Layout specific syntax because you have written something that's kind
exactly
of the attribute selector.
So it's looking for this, and then it's got that tilde selector, and it's looking for this. And if it sees fraction 3/4, it's going to apply styles specifically to this div or whatever you put this on.
And then, so my question for you is then, where is the math happening? Is that math you did yourself through custom logic, or is that because now CSS has stuff built in that makes it easy, just like throw fractions in places?
It's actually just doing it under the hood. So it will, for example, this 3/4, it's actually giving the first value, like doing calc and all that stuff, and using CSS though to figure out exactly how big.
Calc method. Okay.
Yeah. So all of these things require, the CSS framework requires no JavaScript, which means because of that, there's a couple of the primitives that don't exist in the CSS only version that do exist outside of that. And one of those, for example, is the masonry grid, for example, because what it does is does this Pinterest style layout where it will optimize based off the height of the content where it should live.
You should use hipsterism instead.
Hipsterism. And so yeah, like as
ipsum.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or like baconisms. That's actually a pretty good one.
The cat ipsum's a good one too.
Bob Ross ipsums. Actually, that kind of makes me feel good. But yeah, you can see like as it changes, it automatically. But this requires JavaScript. So
yeah, so I had a question about something you said back there about the CS. There's a CSS only version. So how many versions are there, and what are they?
Okay, so there's the CSS framework version. I really want to bring this like as more of a first-class citizen in the docs. It kind of feels like a second-class citizen, but I need I don't know exactly the best way to handle
You
that.
see right there, you referenced the Avo method by Michael
Yeah.
Chan. Why we went through that whole kind of preamble about that.
And then goes into how that works. Then there's the actual React components. So for example, that same split component, you can see it has basically the same API, but instead you're wrapping everything in a split, and then you say like gutter fraction 1/4. Instead of doing fraction colon 1/4, it's just a proper prop that you put on there. And then this is still in development, but I'm hoping to get a 1.0 version really soon, but a solid Bedrock layout. And this is, you can see the docs are still kind of.
Is this
But this is a solid JS.
This
is not Storybook. This is all solid JS. This whole website's running on solid JS.
Yeah, I was curious about that. That's another thing I was going to ask about. Is I remember you saying once that you were like rewriting something in solid, and I'm like, Bedrock Layout is like a CSS library, like using some JavaScript and was using style components. I was like, what is being rewritten to solid? I was like very confused by that. So
what made this possible?
Website in solid, but Bedrock Layout itself has nothing to do with solid.
Correct. Yeah. So what made it possible is by making this CSS framework, it now made it easier to like just create a solid wrapper around that same. Because now the props really are just all about putting the right attribute values and all that under the hood.
Okay, can you bump up your font some more on this one?
Oh, yeah.
A couple more.
So, for example, it's still kind of like there's a couple things I want to make sure before I say this is 1.0. Mm-hmm. So bring it in, have fun, but it's still not a 1.0 version. But
Brandon.
But you can see I'm going for the same API: split, gutter, none. This is my original spacing scheme that I just branched off of. But what I've recently done with this new Bedrock is I've adopted open props sizing schemes, so that it just didn't make sense. This is already out there. This is a really good spacing scheme that Adam Argyle has created, and so let's not make yet another spacing scheme out there for people to do. And then the idea is like, if you don't want to use the built-in one, you're probably going to like overwrite it anyway. So it just made more sense to use open prop spacing scheme rather than create my own.
Can you bump up your font a couple more times
once
on this?
Again.
And then also like, what is the spacing scheme exactly? Like intuitively, I think I understand what you're saying, but like, can you kind of lay out that term?
So like in any design system or style guide, you want to have a consistent spacing scheme where you're not just putting arbitrary values. You want to have like the space between elements and the space like inside of elements you're padding, all those different sizes. You want that to follow a pattern throughout your whole app. And that's what having a spacing scheme gives you, is you can, instead of coming and saying, well, I think this is about 1 rem, or maybe it's 1.5 rem.
And these are the things where inconsistencies on these things across a website, even people who don't know anything about design, they'll look at it and they won't be able to say what, but they'll be like, this looks wrong. It'll just feel wrong to them, and it'll feel janky and weird. And they'll be like, this website just looks bad, but they won't know why.
Exactly. And so that's what having a spacing scheme gives you, is like, it gives you like a limitation, which actually, by giving you that limitation, actually empowers you more, because then you're like, it's got to be this value. I need a large value, and it's got to be bigger than 3 rem. So my only values are these ones, for example. Yeah, and you're not as easy, instead of trying to like go, I think it looks about this, that looks right. You're like, I'm going to put 1 rem. That if that doesn't look right, you can go to, I'm using size 3, I should say. Nope, that doesn't look right. We need to go to size 4 or 5, and then you get to the right, to where it looks right, and it's still consistent across your app. Yeah,
and so were you saying you're going to integrate the open props specifically, or are you going to like what is the relationship between open props and Bedrock Layout?
So Bedrock Layout will now depends on open props, which you can
Okay.
you can npm install, and you can go. If we look at up at the get started, they have a JSON of all their design tokens, and it pulls in those design tokens, and then when you use Bedrock, those design tokens automatically work the same names.
That's really interesting way to package that.
So,
cool. Yeah, open props is one of those things like I hear about constantly, and I've seen Adam RL speak and on podcast a bunch. Very very cool dude, but I haven't really got my hands on it, so I don't like have a super strong mental model around it yet. But it seems like
it's one of these things
people are hyped on it. I will say that.
and there's a lot of reasons why people like Tailwind and other things, but like one of the things that people like about Tailwind that makes it really popular is it's got a really good set of design tokens, a lot of good choices that limit you but make your website just look good automatically.
Yeah, and that's something I definitely felt once I finally did start using Tailwind on a couple projects. I liked that it kind of bounded things in a way where stuff like spacing was kind of simpler and things like that. And so it sounds like open props is an attempt to start bringing in some of those kind of benefits.
Exactly. It allows you to bring in those benefits, but still it's one lower level than I miss what Ben just said. What did he just say?
He was saying, you know how hard it is for me to get excited about CSS frameworks. So, okay, so open props is a CSS framework. I don't know if I've ever necessarily heard it called that.
For lack of better terms, it is. It's just a framework that limits itself to really just giving you just tokens, and then allows you to build your own like framework on top of it. So, is it a framework? Like, it's like, what's the definition of is? Like, it's like,
sounds like it's at the very least it's a CSS library, maybe not full blown framework, but
it's a utility. It's like
Bedrock. CSS is a dependency you install into your project.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So, that makes sense.
But like chances are, if you're working in any mature system, you're probably using your own spacing schemes or whatever anyway. And so the whole idea, and we can go into get started, but like this is where I get into it. But I try to provide an easy way for you to override the default spacing scheme that like is in Bedrock.
Cool. So what I'd like to do kind of with the time we have left is just like spin up a project, like get at least a single Bedrock component into it, and then just like see where we can go from there.
So we can follow this introduction. Actually, let's just get introduction. Kind of goes into more of the.
Okay, so it looks like I need to open a PR and migrate you to Vite.
Yes,
which is funny because I'm the first one who told you to actually put the create React app part in there in the first place, because I said you should have an end-to-end example where you can just run some commands and have something that works. So I will take the hit on having create React in here in the first place. It's on me. Yeah. But now would be the time to migrate that sucker to Vite.
I think that's a good point. In fact, Bedrock is built using Vite. It's now its build library. The Storybook is using the Vite builder. I am 100% in.
So then it looks like from there, you're going to add in two dependencies, Bedrock Layout CSS and Bedrock Layout Stack. Is each individual primitive its own dependency?
It is. So Bedrock Layout, all of the primitives can be individually installed, or you can install all of them at once using Bedrock Layout primitives here. But this allows you to like really like pare down. If you're only using 3 primitives, you'd only need to install 3 of the primitives. You don't have to worry about like the rest, increasing your bundle size arbitrarily.
Yeah, and that's because all this stuff is going to be client side. It's going to be stuff that's going to be delivered to the user's devices. So if you're able to, and this is what I've heard about things like Lodash, that part of the problem with Lodash is that it would give you, maybe you use 1 or 2 utilities and then you get 20 along with it.
Exactly. And it's kind of good in the sense if you're using a lot of them, then it starts making sense. But yeah, I wanted people to really like pare down, or and use all
Well,
of them if they wanted,
I
or
think in
just
this world also we're getting back into heavier NPA usage, and you have frameworks now that are allowing multi-pages. Like you really want to think about what is needed for just this single page. What can I
exactly.
ship to that? We're
Let's
getting
make it
away from
easy
the
for
single
the
page app
bundler to chunk.
mindset of putting like everything into a giant thing that gets shipped, and that's like the whole thing because it's just like it's a bad idea. Like we're able to.
Exactly.
So this feeds into that, like fits very well with that kind of narrative now, I think.
Exactly. And yeah, exactly. Let's make it easy for the bundler to chunk out your library
Mhm.
and do all that. And then yes, it depends on the Bedrock Layout CSS as a peer dependency. That way, I wanted to keep that as a peer dependency, separately installable. So if we fix a bug, you don't have to like reinstall the entire thing. Like you can just get that peer dependency upgrade without having to worry about reinstalling or upgrading all that. And then the same thing, like you can get all of the the CSS for all of the components, or you can individually import them in. Like if you just need the stack or just the center, you can bring those in.
Do you have a repo somewhere of something like this that would be clonable and instantly runnable?
There is a code sandbox that we can do.
So no,
No, I don't. And in fact,
because that'd be a good thing for me to contribute. Then is for you to just have like a single example that you could like clone down and use because that's in this exact situation. I feel like that would be nice to
I
have. But
I
this is
agree.
good too. Bump this up a couple times. Also, Ben is saying here that he is on hiatus. He will be back soon in the future. When? Don't know when. You'll find out.
Sweet. Yeah, got it. How do I close you? But so as you can see here, in this case I'm installing all the primitives just to make it like look well. But let's pull this out and we'll follow that. What we were doing before at Bedrock Layout stack. Then we'll just make that a div for now. In fact, we could just go through this getting started here. You can see, or let's do this. Let's just get rid of all this. What is Istanbul not Constantinople? Why does it think we need the? Am I doing something? Oh, because I'm doing something else in some other page. Yeah, there we go.
Coco Label.
Coco Label. This was whatever. Pull that.
What is
How do
happening?
I get rid of you? Okay. So you're like, okay, great. I'm not really seeing how this is doing anything.
So hold on. Let's pause. Explain what's happening here. Right now we have a React component. We're at just a root app component, and you have a single stack, and you have a gutter set to size 3, and then that just has a header with an H1 in it.
So right now we don't see anything, but if we were to add in like a paragraph, go hello. You can see there's already a space right there, and that's all dependent on this. So I could go size 1 or size 0.
Can you make the browser window a little bit bigger, or just make all of it bigger? I guess. Yeah. All right, that's probably enough. Yeah, and then just kind of zoom that over a bit.
Can I close that or?
There we go. That looks great. Yeah. Just close the file thing. Got it for a second.
There we go. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So we can see, this is automatically putting in a space below between them.
So why is the space 0, 0 or size 0, 0, not just size 0?
Because
Like
that
what
was
what is the size ranges? Is it like 0 to 100 or
is all coming from
okay? So do you point
this.
back to these docs in your own docs, or do you
I
document all of that yourself?
I do document it all myself as well. There are places where it points back.
Okay.
For example, in the spacing. In fact,
Also, for people in the chat, if you have questions while we're doing this, we're getting close to the hour. Do you have a hard stop at the hour, Travis?
I do not, so we can keep going.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, we'll keep going for a little bit then. If people have questions, please feel free to ask them. We'll kind of just keep messing around and looking at different things and different components and
Where
whatnot
was
from
I
here on
at?
out, I think.
But yeah, you can see like I can throw in a whole bunch of things and they're all going to stack, and
Yeah,
then
and then mess around with that.
I can
So,
go size 4,
okay.
size 9. And you can see.
So for me, when I look at this, I can think of already a specific use case for me. On my blog, I have a homepage that displays my 5 most recent blog posts, like exactly what you
Yeah,
have right here, like 5 hellos. Imagine those are blog posts with like a title, a date, a description, and then the cover image for it, and then it has that 5 times. So I would be
yeah.
able to change that. And right now I'm using, I think, Tailwind, because it was just like a starter that I pulled out, and so I just kind of like would change the margin to like margin top to get those to do a similar thing.
So yeah, and so the idea of this is, and the this kind of styling layout is like it follows this principle that I follow. I like calling encapsulated CSS, where the layout, meaning the position, the margin or gutters or gap, whatever you want to call that, in between elements, and like the size of the elements, these individual hellos, they don't choose that themselves. That the parent is the one who has that context of what that spacing, all that layout is, and so that's where it needs to come from. So you notice like we're not coming in and putting margin on all of these paragraphs. We're putting a stack around. The stack goes, okay, I now know what size gap should be between these elements.
So what's the
It's
reason to have a stack within a stack?
Oh, I was going to show
Is that you
you. So
can
we can
have
have,
different gutters
yeah. So I can have size
in each
6
of your
in here.
posts.
Oops. Yeah, I know how to write React. Size 6. So you can see the first one has a bigger
Make some
gap.
different words so it's not just all hello, hello. Like
Yeah,
make
that's a good point.
the inside one's different.
Inside, hello, Bob's your uncle. There you go.
And so also, what is a gutter?
So this is one of these things, like it gets gutters and gaps and margin, like it gets
Where do
kind of
these
like,
terms come from?
I don't know where, to be honest, I don't know where they came from. Like I've heard designers use different terms for different things.
Yeah.
Like some people
So
say the gutters are just
did
these
you kind
different
of
things.
name your own just from like your own experience and the other
Yeah,
things you built and kind of what you've seen and your own intuitive ideas of what's the best word for a certain thing?
exactly. These are all just like words my designers have said. Anyway, like, yeah. So and honestly, the word gutter is like a holdover from that original. um,
This is what I find interesting about design though, is this like it's a very emergent practice because you can't like kind of make a top-down system that defines all of this. It's impossible.
oh,
Everyone has built up their own kind of combinations of different things that are important to them and their own ways of describing them. And there's like meta concepts that are shared across them, but everyone has their own way of kind of explaining it. And there's no one to ever create like a single system that explains all of it.
and there's like a lot of it that gets left over because hey, thanks for coming.
Wait, Nick.
Online. That like there are words that came from print media and they still exist, and some of the original CSS you can see like some of those properties are there because of print media. But you
And
also
we
see
thought
like
of websites as like a newspaper page or a
exactly
magazine, or we would port these older print mediums to a web page, and we would think about it the same way. And this is why a lot of semantic HTML, when I was at least taught semantic HTML, like in boot camps, they would talk about like the article and like how you would kind of think of it like it's an article, and that would be a way where you could make all the parts of the page semantic because it's like a blog post. But then
Exactly.
I was always like, but these things, if you're building just like one-off components, then those terms don't make any sense because it's not then. It's just like it's a chunk of functionality contained within some sort of abstract idea that's decoupled from the idea of a physical print medium at all. And that's where you then get this like whole breakdown where we used to have a good, strong mental models around this stuff because it was just a page. Everyone's held a magazine before. Everyone's held a newspaper before, but
well, and that's why like
components is totally different.
Things to like engineers like are confusing, like, and it still comes in there. For example, Flexbox on the main access to when we talk about how it's going to go, we talk about that's the justify content is space around. Well, that comes from the term that like the justification comes from typography, and that was on that main accent. So like
I never knew that. That's really interesting.
But like personally, maybe this is just me. Like I would think of that as just like horizontal or like main alignment or vertical alignment, and that's
the term justified never made any sense to me.
And I think they've kind of moved away from a little bit, especially even with Flexbox, it was still left over. As they keep adding more and more CSS, they're like, we really need to like add something that makes sense for designers and developers because they're both using these terms. So I think the best example of something that's pretty good is like grid. I think the grid, like,
because the grid is an idea that is very clear. Everyone's seen grids before.
Yeah,
it conjures up an image in your mind that is probably similar for most people when they hear that word.
And I've debated it would be a breaking change switching gutter to gap because that's more terminology used in like CSS.
So when I hear gap, that makes sense to me. When I hear gutter, I think house gutters. Like I think like water being drained from a gutter, and I'm like, what is what? Huh?
and I potentially, I guess you could support both, but then you have to like create more. It just adds that extra layer.
Then you're giving yourself headaches. Yeah. No, gap makes a lot of sense. So
and when I was doing the breaking change, I really debated whether to like change that from gutter to gap, but I decided to like keep it because I wanted to make it, even though it was technically breaking things, I wanted to still make it as easy as possible to transition. So maybe a future breaking change in the future, I may switch this to gap.
Right.
But like,
can we look at a couple components aside from the stack? What are some other like things, like if you were to give someone like you're starting with Bedrock Layout, like what are the first 3 things that someone should learn first, like aside from after the stack, what are the next 2 things someone should learn?
I think a really good one is and in fact I believe let's just go, we'll skip a couple lessons and we'll go, we're going to build a hero. So you'll see,
so we're going to go on the hero's journey, you're saying.
The hero's journey.
We're going to start from a point of ignorance. We will go out and venture into the world. We will face a challenge. We will learn something, and then we will return to our point of origin to share that knowledge as the hero's journey for anyone who doesn't know.
Exactly. So I'm going to get rid of that, and we're going to need to install this inline component. No, where is this? Oh, there we go. So we Bedrock Layout inline. So
what is inline?
So inline, we can go over here. So in a way, you could think of this as the horizontal stack. And some people will actually call, when they make layout components like this, they call it the H stack or a horizontal stack. I prefer to call inline A. That fits more with what's actually happening under the hood as far as like right to left and all that stuff. It's going to be in inline.
Horizontal makes a lot more sense to me, like horizontal stack versus vertical stack.
But that's coming from the perspective of English user who's reads left to right, whereas
you're in English no matter what though, and that's not that has nothing to do with left to right. That has to do with horizontal versus vertical.
Well, no, I get it, but like horizontal, like how do the words flow on a page in a vertical? Inline is actually top to bottom, and things stack maybe right to left. So if you're in that's why I prefer to call.
you're using the term inline in terms of inline versus block in the web dev.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that's why I prefer to use inline. Just
that makes sense. Then if you're using it within that context, I get where inline comes from there. Yeah, that makes sense.
So we're using inline because it's horizontal, but it's actually it's inline.
Yeah, it's more about that it's not breaking the flow of individual element. It's allowing elements to stack next to each other.
And then we need to import. And that's the other thing. And part of this breaking change I did this consistently is I have to use only named exports now. Let's get rid of some of these other things that I said.
Why do you only use named exports now?
It's a lot easier. I feel it's a better developer experience because if you need to go find where you're using your inline and you go search in your VS Code, what if this was a default export? I could have called this inline, and it would have worked. And VS Code is so helpful. This would have proliferated through the whole component, and I would never even notice potentially. And with the default export, this just works. If you really want to have a different name, then just take advantage of or as inline. If that's really what you want to do, I know it's a little bit more verbose, but if you want to find all the uses of inline, you'll still find this.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
And also just it's nicer on my build tools. But if it was just for that, I wouldn't do it. I just feel this is a more consistent and easier developer experience. If you want to go find your uses, this will make sure you're doing the correct thing. So we got to this point. Let's go back to that lesson. We're like, hey, let's build this hero component. Actually, should have been a little bit better. But let's say we want to have multiple buttons here. You can see they're all going inline.
And if you keep doing it, it's going to wrap around. If you add a fourth one.
By default, it will not. It'll actually.
It goes.
Just keep going off.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so this is where you're the inline has. Well, depends on. This is where inline gets complicated because, do I want it to always wrap around? How do I want to handle when I've got too many things?
Yeah, and that's a philosophical question of how you feel about word wrap. I always turn on word wrap because I don't like ever having to scroll to the right. But I'm sure there's people who would disagree with that.
So there's a couple other things inline lets you do. So you can also come in here and you go, hey, I want this first one to stretch. And then so we can go start. And here, let me get some of these things out of here. Or actually, you can see this first one stretching to take up available space, and then this other one is just taking up its regular amount. So that's the other thing that inline lets you do. But the other thing you can go.
Each individual primitive has its own kind of API in terms of things you can pass it to modify it and customize.
Exactly. So the idea is things inline are going to be, you maybe want to stretch all of them. You want them to take up some things to take up different spaces. But the other thing that there's a switch at property, which lets you go, hey, at a certain width, once this inline gets to a certain width, I want you to start stacking. Or let me find a bigger one. Or let's make it a little bit more obvious. Okay. So
I like this default you got, by the way, of building up a fashion design website.
I was just like, why not? Elegant,
Yeah,
feminine,
nice.
fancy.
I've never seen it before. It's unique.
And then you're like, hey, I still want my each
So you're
item.
responsive, it looks like.
Yeah, so that way you decide what type of responsiveness means. And this is Bedrock also tries to go with trying to remember the term off the top of my head all of a sudden, but like intrinsic responsiveness. So you're not creating media queries, you're not trying to do this. You're basically trying to set like hints and tell the browser, hey, when we get to this point, just kind of move into this responsive way. So it's not really like, hey, I have this 40 pixels, shift everything, or this minimum width. You're trying to say, hey, when the container gets to a certain width, like start stacking or doing things like this. And then or not min content. Oh, I can't see what I'm doing. Fit content. Okay, so on here, if you can see what this is doing. So the inline, I'm saying, hey, at 50 CH, switch to a stacking layout. But I still want each item to at least fit their content. So the minimum item width, meaning each item inside needs to at least have a minimum width that fits the content. And this could be anything. Like you can say, I want it to be at least 100 pixels, or whatever. And then I want the first one to stretch, and then I want a gutter. So with these little configs, you can see like, hey, this first item stretching, this other one's fitting the content. And then when we get to a point where I've deemed it's no longer makes sense to be in line, which is that switch at, it will automatically go to a stacking layout. So, and
Very
the cool thing
cool.
about like this inline, like all of that's done with just CSS. There's no JavaScript that made all that work. So
is this the hero part, or is there more to make it a heroic?
The part that we're going to do to make this heroic is we're going to use what's called a cover component. So Bedrock Layout cover. And I'll just do this in line, which is so the idea is the cover is it's going to cover by default like the whole view height. I know how to do my own library.
Do you need your @
Yep, I do. Then I'll get the autocomplete cover. Yay.
Nice.
And then instead of the stack, I'm going to make this a cover.
You got an error still, I think, on your
cover.
You have an error on the dependency import. I think there's
undefined.
Yeah, you clicked it, but for some reason didn't actually fill it in.
So as you see,
what you gotta get on Stack Blitz, brah.
I know. That makes a lot of sense. So you can see it's still working, but you can see what it's done is this cover is taking up the entire view height, and then it's vertically centering the content inside. But sometimes you want like a top section. So let's put that up there. Let's go. I'm just going to put I don't know, a paragraph tag for now. I know this isn't great. Ben's probably like, this is horrible semantic HTML.
So you're just straight up inlining HTML into this guy?
So this says, hey, this section should be on top.
Whoa.
And then you're like, well, if it's centered, what do I need this gutter for? Well, if you're vertical.
See, this is where stuff starts to weird me out, though, because right now you're putting HTML into your CSS, and like I can put my CSS as a job, so that's fine. I'm putting my HTML into CSS, and something's gotten horribly wrong here, and I don't know what's happening anymore.
So technically, this is not putting HTML in my CSS. This is using React, and it's it like under the hood, it's injecting this above.
Yeah, I don't know.
The
Strange.
children.
It makes me uncomfortable.
This is, and then like if you want to have a, I'm just gonna go hello. You can see it just threw this text here and then at the bottom, and you can, this gutter is forcing that, despite it's going to keep this gap in between this item and this item. And I can go, size 0 again. Anyway, you can get an idea of what this is doing.
Cool. So this is the hero image then?
Yeah. Now the thing about this is like all divs all over the place, and I know like Ben Myers is cringing under the hood, but like I can come in here and I can go as main, and now it's using semantic HTML under the hood here.
So the as is what turns into the actual element.
Yeah, so I can come in here again. This isn't a nav, but like whatever.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
If this really was my navigation, like I can make this a nav.
Yeah.
And that's what, because there's no way to know, like for me, the developer at this point, who's made this library, to know what this inline is going to be, because in different contexts, it's going to be different elements. And so that's why each one of these components actually do this.
Ben says control over markup is good. Yeah, no, I agree. Giving those kind of escape hatches is really important.
Because otherwise you'd be doing annoying things like nav or putting it maybe inside, and then you always run into situations where it doesn't work the way you want.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Great. Do you have any other final components you want to show as like a last one before we close it out?
Trying to think of a good example. Oh, here's a good example of like composing. So this is vertically aligned, this Coco Labelle. But let's say, hey, I want to not just have this part vertically centered, I also want to horizontally center. So I'll bring this in here in just a moment.
So you're telling me I can center divs with Bedrock Layout?
You can. And you can do, in fact, I'll show you. Maybe we'll just show you this. There is some examples. And this is where I really need to like build out as well. I'm trying to create some what's it called? Like recipes and things like that. And one of the ones that already exists out there is this web.dev layout patterns.
Yeah, web.dev is a very great resource for a lot of things.
And so when this came out, I was like, I bet I can create most of these. And so I did. The one I don't like, this clamping card doesn't exist with, it says I'm open to suggestions if you can find. I don't have a primitive for clamping because it really, you kind of need to live that one level lower. And it really, I haven't found a good API that really makes sense. But there's this super centered where you're like, hey, I want to vertically center and horizontally center. And you can choose that with Bedrock, with cover, and then the center using also centered children.
Very cool.
But like, let's, I have too many things open. Let's add that. Layout, center. Center. Oh, I guess it didn't install it properly.
Looks like I have an error again on your import.
I think because it hasn't installed it yet.
Oh, I gotcha.
There we go. And then I can go center children. What the center will do by itself, default, is that it will go.
Yeah, see that looks nice. Yeah.
Oh, so let's do this, and I can go max width equals 20 ch. You can see if I take this off by itself.
Sorry, what is CH?
CH is basically, for lack of better words, it's 20 characters of your font.
Okay, I see.
Like it's technically like, if you want to go into it, it's like technically not that, but like it's basically what they do under hood is a good like proxy for a character. That's why I like to just prefer to call it a 20. It stands for character.
Okay, interesting.
But like, so you're like, hey, this should be 20 characters, or maybe we'll bump this to 30 characters. So it'll take up the entire width, but once you get to a certain width, it will max out there and it will center itself.
CH.
Yeah, I knew Ben would know the answer. It's technically the
zero character in the game font. See, I don't even I don't even know what that means.
Zero is pretty much a good proxy for what a character width is, because sometimes you have like your W's, which are really wide, and then you have your I's, which are really small. But like if you average that out, it's your zero is pretty much a good proxy for what the average character width would be in any.
Oh, so font. You mean the width of like a zero printed on screen?
The actual technical pixel width of what the zero is.
What a zero? Yeah. So that is used as like a unit of measurement.
Yeah. So basically, that width right there.
Okay, I understand now.
Is a unit of measurement. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's really good, like especially when you're like thinking about this as a content. Like, what's the content? Like, does 40 pixels or 60 pixels make sense? What makes more sense? And now that we have these characters, it really makes sense. You can say, I really don't want this wider than 40 pixels or 40 characters. So whatever that happens to be in your font, I don't want it to be wider. If you have a really small font.
Okay, so there's different proxies that people use to define.
Yeah. And these are all part of the CSS spec.
Okay. Very cool. Great. Okay.
So you can do this, and then if you want to center the children, or I also put in here center text, because this is the few times that you might actually want centered text. So it just made sense to like have that as I used to keep that separate, but like it just happens so often that I'm like, let's just bump this to like a first class citizen on the center, because that's one of the few times that centering your text actually makes sense, is when you're doing sometimes this centered thing on a hero. Anyway.
Cool. Awesome. So we're going to close out here in a bit, but I was just kind of curious what the future of Bedrock Layout looks like, and what are some things you're thinking about right now. Sounds like you said there's a 1.0 possibly coming up. So I'd love to hear more about that.
So I want to get solid Bedrock to a 1.0. The other things I want to do is, you can see here, I've got this locale switcher. Somebody came in, gave me a really cool PR and translated the landing page in Espanol. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I grew up in California.
Exactly, and it was great. And I got a little bit of some help getting some of the contributing page in Spanish.
This is awesome. This is very cool.
And so one thing I'm working on, I finally kind of got it down, is I want to make it a lot easier for people to contribute and translate this page. So I've got the foundation. I just now need to start adding it to the doc site to make it easy for people to come in and like just go straight to the translations and fix translations and go, yep, this sucks. And this is a better way, and do a PR for it without having to clone the whole repo. They can just go straight into GitHub and make an edit and update it. So I want to do that. I want to get more and more of these pages translated. The other really big thing is I really want to create more of these examples, create a lot more recipes, really show how this works. And I think what you're saying, Anthony, like get a repo, an official repo that like people can bring this down. Just provide as many more examples that people can see how it works.
Yeah, I've found it's something I tend to do is I like having just like example repos, and it can connect to a documentation somewhere, but I find just like how many someone can easily clone down, like run a command to install dependencies, run a command to just start it up, and then it's like bam, you got it. Then you can start playing with it, editing it, doing whatever you want. That's a really great way to just get started with any tool, I find.
And apparently I need to get rid of create React app and move to the V.
Yeah, and with V and get your whatever is happening with your storybook, maybe figure that out. I think is the solid thing going to replace the current docs? Is that the plan? Or is that
as of right now, the solid one
entirely?
is just for solid because like I need a solid application to make all those components work. And storybook, I'm still really tied to it. It made it really easy to do this big breaking change because I can make sure that the regressions didn't happen as I moved away from the style components into the Bedrock CSS. I'm still really tied to it, but I
saw that you're getting benefits from it.
Yeah, it does. It does make the negative side. It's kind of made it kind of hard to add things to the doc site outside of what Storybook supports. As well as to dog food my own.
By the way, for FSJam listeners, next episode come up is going to be Chantastic talking about Storybook. If people want to know more about Storybook or Chromatic, that's on deck.
Like if I was like a group of maintainers like React and like people pay me to do this, I would still keep Storybook, but I would do like 11D or something, Astro or something, to build my doc site separately. And have
because it seems like a bit of a weird fit for a doc site.
It works for me because I'm, as of right now, the only maintainer.
We're starting to head out. See everyone, we're closing it out. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate all y'all.
So that was a long-winded way to say, everybody keep helping me. Start contributing. Tell me things suck, and I'll put your picture on here. This is how Anthony got on here because he told me my doc site sucked.
Yeah, I didn't say it sucks. I said it could use an end-to-end example, is what I said.
It could use some things that made it better, is what he said. But he basically is like, your doc site sucks.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for this. This has been a super great episode. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch this one because there was a lot of stuff in here, and I'm very curious to actually possibly integrate Bedrock Layout into one of my projects going forward because I like this idea. I like it as a mental model. I like having these kind of on hand, easy to use type components that make my website look a bit more professional because I am not a CSS wizard. I am quite terrible at CSS in many ways. So I think I'm one of the target audiences of this. And so I very much appreciate that people like you are building stuff that are going to help me ship things that look a little less bad.
No worries. On a future stream, we could do it together if that's what you want.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, this is great, man. Thank you so much. And I think we'll call it here.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back next week with something. Find out soon.